So, hello everyone. My name is Matthias Strobel. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it's so great to see so many of you for this next 1.5 hours, I guess, in which we're going to talk about AI and the power of AI for creativity, how much of human virtuosity is going to play a role in the future, or if it plays an even bigger role. And I'm here with 3 really amazing people, and the cool thing is that they all come from different fields of science or from different professional backgrounds. So this, for me, that I'm doing these kind of things on music conferences usually, and it's basically almost the same kind of people. So this brings a whole different perspective even for me on that topic, and I'm super excited to hopefully learn a lot today, because they all come from different fields. And with that being said, I'd like, the best is probably you introduce yourself and tell a little bit what you're doing, and then we dive into the questions and the conversation. You want to start?
I start? Yeah. Okay, sure. So I'm Jennifer HAASE. I'm a postdoc right now, so I do research at the Weizmann Institute as well as the Humboldt University in computer science. But my background is in psychology. I think that's going to be important today because I usually take the human perspective. And most of the time I look at creativity. So I ask questions about what it is, how we can increase creativity individually. And since I'm now in the computer science department, I fell in this rabbit hole of technology. And so my questions are specified of how technology shapes our creative thinking.
Great, thank you. Uwe?
My name is Uwe OHLER. I'm actually a professor at Humboldt University in computer science and in biology. I work at the Max Delbrück Center, so that's who we have to thank for all these goodies that are lying around there. This is our outreach department, trying to make you happy and engaged. The Max Delbrück Center is a center for molecular medicine, so I've worked in getting AI and machine learning useful to understand biomedical data. And so that's what my group does, that's what a lot of my colleagues in our institute do, to essentially try to get computational methods and machine learning in the eye specifically to gain insights into how our genome works and how, for instance, the genome doesn't work when you get sick.
Yeah, my name is AMIRPASHA, MOBINI TEHRANI. I'm a music machine learning engineer and a computer musician. I'm very interested in investigating algorithmic processes, in creating different sorts of compositions, and also investigating machine learning in different musical applications, from creating sounds directly using AI to using it as an indirect assistant to help us create those sounds.
All right, interesting. My first question is probably to all of you, because we talk about AI. AI has been around for centuries, but it now has this hype and everybody talks about it, and I think music is a good way of talking about AI, because I guess all of us, and especially you that are here, have some sort of relation with music, and AI is gonna have an impact on that. So my first question is, maybe you can answer that from your own perspective. What was your first encounter with AI in relation to music or creativity in the broader sense? Like the first ever. Do you want to start?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I'm not quite sure, because the more closer I got to realizing how machine learning is playing a role in music, the better I understood how early I was actually exposed to it. So coming from the music composition background, I think it was around 2010, 2011 where algorithmic machine learning algorithms started emerging in plugin settings. So I think that was actually my first exposure to machine learning in the context of music.
Well, plugin.
In the plugins, yes. Yeah.
Jennifer?
Sure. I think mine is actually quite recent in terms of, if you think about really intelligence. When ChatGPT came around, I think it was exactly a year ago, right, in November, and all my colleagues were all over it and talking about that, and I was fairly new to this whole concept, not chatbots per se, but generative chatbots. And I think one of the first things that I typed in was the standard creativity measure we were going to talk today about. And I asked it the standard question, like, what can you do with a brick? Sounds stupid, but it's like a standard measure. And it gave very reasonable answers. And I think that was one of the first times when I thought, okay, this machine is not just intelligent, but appears to be also creative. And I think that's how my journey that brought me here started. Yeah.
And you now use it as a tool in your daily life.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Ooh, how was it with you?
Yes, it's a while ago actually. I would say about 30 years ago when I was an undergrad. Yes, it's a long time. I'm dating myself here. When I studied computer science, I studied in Erlangen, Nuremberg, and this is a university that actually had a strong foundation in what's called pattern recognition at the time. In fact, they had two different institutes for pattern recognition, so the data-driven AI that we see today, instead of classical AI, which was actually more trying to get humans to explain to a computer what they know and represent human knowledge in some form of database. It was called expert system, and so it was separate. And so I went into this pattern recognition, and actually, because I was interested in linguistics and in speech recognition, so that's what my audio experience was essentially speech recognition. So we tried to, at the time, build real-time, my diploma thesis, I think, was to build a speech recognizer that could recognize 150 to 200 words in real time. That's how far we were at the time with the computers at the time, with the models and the data we had at the time. And it's, for me, of course, it's like awesome to see how far we've come in these decades in the meantime, that this is just something like we take for granted. We take out our phone and talk to Siri, right? And it just understands us in real time. And back in the days, it was different, even just to get data and to have material to work with.
Did you follow up on that, like in your, like on your research that you did back in the days when you like finished your thesis? Was that topic done for you then, or did you follow up and research more and more on?
So no, it continued with biology, right? So I transitioned to biology because our DNA sequence is essentially like a book. We represent it as letters, right? Our 4 nucleotides, A, C, G, T. And so I then started training machine learning models to try to read this book and tell me what its content was. So in machine learning, there was an early, or in speech recognition, an early application called topic spotting, so that you don't necessarily understand exactly what's going on, but that you understand, oh, this is a news piece about sports or the weather, or how your phone starts to recognize, oh, these are pictures of people or landscapes and so forth. And so the same thing, these same models we started applying in biology when data became available through the Human Genome Project to say, oh, this is probably a piece of the genome that codes for an enzyme that helps you to metabolize sugar, and here's a piece that has a switch function and switches on genes in your liver and so forth.
All right, can you a little bit maybe, like there's totally, like there's different things in AI, machine learning, and a lot of like words that probably not everyone understands. In your daily life, when you work and when you do your research, can you explain on that research maybe a bit more visually how you use AI and what kind of AI systems you use in that research, so to make people understand what this AI is actually capable of doing, and then we talk about how this can be applied to creativity maybe, or music.
And so I would want to start with one definition. Oh my God, now it gets boring.
I can give you that clicker in case you want to show something.
Oh, okay. So there are, like you said, different buzzwords going around, and one thing that I would like to just get everyone on the same page on is what's called machine learning. Machine learning is I would say, a part of AI. AI, artificial intelligence, is a bit of a broader concept, an older concept. Machine learning is essentially an area in computer science or statistics where we want to build systems that learn from data. So you have data available, you build a computer system that then can actually do something useful with new data. So the classical thing was actually reading address labels, like automatic mail sorting was one of the super early AI systems, right? It's a very defined problem, and you have examples. You have humans that tell you, oh, this is what somebody wrote on this letter. Please, computer, now learn for new letters what the address says so that it gets automatically sent to the right place. right? And so that's a classical definition of machine learning. I have data, I train my computer based on examples, what typical examples problems look like, and then I can use the computer on its own to do something independently on new data that it hasn't seen before.
It does it automatically then?
Yes.
All right, because it follows certain rules.
Exactly. So
but
it tries
you
to
define the rules.
That's why it was called often pattern recognition at first. Like it tries to recognize simple patterns like the individual letters on your letter and puts that together to solve a larger problem.
So it doesn't come up with like it doesn't have their own path of like doing things. Like it's really packed in a corset of rules, and this machine learning system that you built or that you're working with doesn't step outside these rules.
That's a good question. So in early days, I would say yes, that was the case. That you really tried and thought, oh, especially Germans follow rules. We just need to tell the computer what the rules are, and then the computer will be good. No, I mean that's not how it works, right? I mean even in letters, again, it's a good example. Handwriting. My handwriting is terrible. I'm pretty impressed by any computer can read what I'm writing, right? My students usually have problems too. And so often our data isn't perfect, right? I mean, people might put the zip code on the wrong place, or write the last name first and then the first name last, and do different things. And all our handwriting is really terrible. And it still can recognize this. Yeah. So data can be imperfect, and it's big issue in machine learning and AI applications is bias in the data, right? So a computational system like a machine learning system can only be as good as the data that you give it. The data is often very noisy or imperfect or biased, and so the rules aren't actually strict rules. Any of these models, be it what's called probabilistic models or now neural networks, they don't work with fixed rules. They actually try to find things in your data and then make inferences about it. So they use probabilities and say, actually I think this is 89% a cat and 11% a dog, right? So it will never be a 1-1 fixed decision. Many or almost all of these systems have probabilities and uncertainties to work with. And now that opens, of course, also a door, because that's how we get to these super interesting large models now that aren't just stuck in exactly what they know and can't do anything, but you can try to get them to do new things.
All right. Yeah. So, but like, do you see any, like, there's still a human part in it, right? Because when you talk about probability and like the results that come out of this pattern recognition or the machine learning system that you work with, so at the end of the day, you as a human being have to go through the results of that system in order to make sure that it detected a cat and not a dog.
Well, it depends on your application, right? I think again, mail sorting, it probably just gets sent to somebody and you'll complain if you got a piece of letter that was at the wrong address, right?
Yeah.
And so what's more important is that we understand what these systems are doing and why they're doing certain things.
But these systems are not getting or becoming creative by themselves. So because like that's the thing where I want to go is like the thing that you work with or the AI systems that you work with, they are made for a certain purpose and you use it to do research, and you don't want them to like do things outside of that pattern system that you created.
I'm not sure if is these my slides? Yeah. Let's see. I can show you a little bit of what we are actually doing this so that you get an idea and it's not just an abstract thing. So this, I figured we're in a natural history museum, right? So this is actually a plant that is used in genetics research. It's a weed. It's called Arabidopsis, Ackerschmalwand in German. It grows everywhere. That's why it's used, because you can just grow it and it grows like wheat because it's a weed. And it's a very simple thing, and it'll just grow everywhere essentially. And what we with colleagues try to understand how roots of this model plant, of this example plants actually grow. I mean, many plants have similar setup and layout of a root that you can see here. And so a root is an organ in a plant, and it has different cell types, and it has some stem cells where the cell divisions occur. And so we want to understand what do these cells look like? And now could we, for instance, understand when something goes wrong? Like if there's a mutation, why would the root grow differently and not as it normally does? No? And so what we can do, and this is the type of data, just that you understand in biology, why are we also talking about machine learning, for instance, in this context? We can sort of dissect a root as is shown here in the individual cells. So you have a few thousand cells per root. And each of these cells has genes, has a program, like its genome does things, right? So we all have a genome almost as a hard drive in each of our cells. And different cells activate different things to do stuff, right? And so these different cell types in the root, they're doing different things. There's the xylem and phloem, where your nutrients flow and signaling occurs, and you have a skin, an epidermis, and so forth. And so we can get measurements out of each of these cells. So I have a data set of several thousand cells, and for each of these cells, I observe what each of over 20,000 genes is doing. So it's a bit, I could almost think like customers at Amazon, right? Like at Amazon, you have like many different products you can buy. Here we have many different things that can get active. And just as like Amazon wants to group customers into different buckets, we can group these cells into different buckets and try to group them together and understand which cells have a similar function. And so then you get these representations, these pictures, like this kind of pointillistic impressionist picture there where it says epidermis and so forth. These are actually, it's a visualization where each of these dots is a cell, and it's colored because it does different things, like different customers buy different things. And so then we can build these computational models actually of how a root actually grows. So we have the stem cells in the root, and they will divide, and these cells will age and perform different functions. And so with our machine learning approaches now, we integrate all these data to have a computer model of what a normal root looks like. And now I can use this model, similar like generative models in music, to get that transition to say, oh, if I change this gene here, would my plant still grow normal? Would my 3D model of the root look like it does now? Or maybe some tissues don't grow as well. The root will grow faster, or it will miss some tissues completely if something goes wrong. So I can use this. Creativity in the sciences is, like, we have the same models, but we don't want the model to be creative in unpredictable fashion. We want to say, oh, if I change this, what happens? And of course, like you said, the human is in the loop, because we will go back to the lab and then say, well, is this actually true?
All right, okay. AMIRPASHA, do you use a similar machine learning system when you talk about machine learning, but like taking this kind of concept of like detecting little bits and pieces in sound and music, learning from it, and then maybe using it in a different way for the kind of craft that you're doing? Maybe you want to tell first what kind of like music and sound and what your approach to music and sound is, and then answer this question if you're using, or maybe the other way around, and tell if you do a similar thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the scope is like quite high when the scope is quite vast when we talk about music. But like looking at this graph, it really reminds me of a lot of machine learning approaches that we have done, especially. Well, just like a little bit of background for you, I have done a lot of. I've spent a lot of time and research on the topic of timbre transfer and voice conversion, and what that essentially is, that a lot of these models, you get to see them online, that you're singing through a model and the different voices coming out of it, or you're sending the sound of piano through this model and saxophone sound is coming out, for instance. And what this graph reminds me of is, imagine, as you have described, we are training a model, and then we are feeding the sound of piano into that model, and this is like the representation of what AI, let's call it the way AI sees that model, and then we are going through the space, touching upon different data points, and see what kind of transformation happens if we are just moving in this space, what kind of sound transformation might come out if you're like mutating these data points that the AI has represented for us. So, yeah.
So you're using that, that sounds like the tools that you described, like when you sing into a microphone and a saxophone or a beat or whatever can come out of that. So you're using this kind of like machine learning detection system in order to figure out how to build the best tool for then the artist who wants to use that in a creative way, but you're not building it to, or is that the way?
Particularly, yes, yes. Well, I mean, the intention, the focus of my practice is always putting humans at the center of creativity. It's by no means trying to replace or trying to make like an autonomous system that is just doing everything by itself. It's always a new tool given to the musicians to express themselves in new forms and new ways. So that's what I refer to when I talk about voice conversion and timbre transfer.
Okay, but then you're on the, like, because this is something that a lot of people get mixed up, and the biggest hype that we get these days is about generative AI, and is it going to be a threat for artists because it's going to replace everyone, and music going to be done with the click of a button and all the kind of stuff. What you're doing has, in the first place, nothing to do with that, right? You're basically building tools. Like, we come to that later. I think that generative AI is also going to enhance creativity and artistry and virtuosity in some sort of way. But what you are building is something that doesn't create music or sound by itself. It doesn't generate music or sound by itself. It is a way of enhancing artists.
It's a way of extending them to a stretch that it was not possible so far. These systems could be used for autonomous generation of sounds, but they cannot be, they cannot utilize themselves to just generate something without a human supervising them. So it's all about the intentions of the human using the system, whether it's malicious or not non-malicious.
Do you work with, would you consider yourself first a researcher or an artist?
Well, I study multidisciplinary music studies, so I'm constantly moving in between. Okay, I would say.
Do you think that, like, all of these? I think in your case, it's mainly researchers. You don't have other people involved, like mathematicians, probably coders, but people who are in the science and research field. With your case, it's more you need to collaborate between like different worlds, like researchers and developers and artists and musicians. So my question is, like, how do you do that? Because every one of them lives in their own bubble. They speak a certain language. They have a certain access to all these tools and how they do things. How do you get people to do the same, like to reach for the same goal and communicate with each other when the artists probably don't understand what the coder's doing and the researchers don't what the artists want to do? Like, is there do you have like a certain translator within your teams, or are you doing that, or how does that work? Because that's what I find fascinating, is like most of these tools that especially you are building, they involve so many different people from different disciplines that it's really important to have a clear way of communicating with each other.
Well, in this instance, I'm actually the translator myself, because I know the language of music and musicians, and as well as the technical vocabulary for developing these systems. So yeah, like in this situation, I'm navigating myself around and try to keep myself informed about the aesthetics and the artistical requirements of building these systems in order to actually translate in an artistical context, as well as striving towards developing these systems slightly further in a scientific manner. So yeah, to be honest, it's a bit of a headache for myself from time to time, but that's how it's taking place.
Do you have the problem that artists want to get more creative than researchers? And because like my experience working with like these different kind of people, some people like to follow a strict path and know this is the goal we need to achieve. And then if you work with artists, if they see an opportunity to express their creativity in a more profound way, or kind of like be more perfectionist because there's a thing that they could use and nobody has thought of. Is the creative part of like building these kinds of tools rather in the way of achieving these goals, or is that something that helps to get a step further?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, because, well, the first thing that comes to my mind, as Uwe has explained, these models are probabilistic, so it's never determined the outcome the outcome is never determined. So it's like one time you might interact with these models, you might send in a data, some sort of outcome will be resulted, and the other times it's different. And I think from the scientific point of view, that could lead to a disadvantage, because we might actually be needing these probabilistic models to be more accurate. But I think in the artistical sense, what I have actually seen in the arts world is artists are actually taking this indeterminism an advantage to create a new aesthetic, and using these aesthetic to express themselves differently and actually set themselves apart, because they are interacting with these models. They might have an expectation, but the expectation is not met. However, there is a result there, and it's their iterative interaction with that outcome that leads them to find new aesthetical paths. And actually, what I like to refer to as the aesthetic of unintended artifacts.
All right, yeah. So it kind of like influences their way of going forward, and kind of like enhances their creativity in the same way. But the machines that you are building are run by people who have a lot of creativity in them in order to make these machines, but the machines themselves are not creative. Like, because sorry, I'm trying to like get everyone on the same page, but there's like the term creativity, we all use that, and I was like, when I prepared for the panel today, I was like, virtuosity and creativity, is there like a definition for that term? Like, what is creativity? And I don't know if you can answer that too, but what's the difference from creativity to virtuosity? Because I can tell you what I thought. I thought it's like, if you know your craft well, and you go beyond all the skills that, if you can play the piano, you know everything, like you getting virtuose if you know your craft by heart, and you can step outside the structures and given rules that you have been trained on, and then you are becoming a virtuose person. But I don't know if that's, you're the creativity
right.
expert here.
Yeah. So I can define creativity.
Yeah, right.
So it's actually, like, there are many definitions, and they can look complex, whatever. But to keep it very simple, like, the essence of creativity is to generate something that is new and useful. That's the core. Two aspects, new and useful. And both, if you think about them, both are super dependent on the situation and definition in the situation. So my example always is that if you look at a child, and a child learns that crayons also stick on walls, that's new and useful to them because they like it and they have fun while doing it, right? And we as adults look at it and think, it's what the heck. So it really depends on like the perspective of the person acting, as well as the kind of like the person or the system looking at the results and judging it. So creativity is nothing objective, never. So that's the start. And if you think about those systems, because you ask, are these systems creative? It really depends, the answer, on who you're asking. But you asked me, so I would say yes. Because if you follow the definition, we see that especially generative AI tools like ChatGPT, like DALL-E, whatever, Midjourney, they come up with new, and if you judge the results as useful, also with useful results. So as I said at the beginning, I asked ChatGPT when it was super new in November last year, what can you do with a brick? And it came up with like a set of alternative uses. And they might not be new to the world, but so aren't the answers you usually get from humans. And it's fairly comparable, as you will see. So yeah, they can be creative.
Okay, so machines can be creative in the sense of like what we define as creativity,
Yes.
without the machines knowing what creativity is.
Yeah, and that is, okay, that's where the juicy part starts, right? Because some researchers would also argue, or creativity researchers would argue, they only appear to be creative. But where the heck is the difference? If I ask you the same question, what could you do with a brick? And you gave me answers, I value those answers. I can judge them, whether they are new or useful or original, whatever. And do I know whether you are creative or you appear creative? I think you are creative. That's what we assign to, right? So if I ask a tool and it gives me answers and I do the same judgment, I would infer the same being of creativity.
Okay. So basically, at the end of the day, everything that we do, we define ourselves, it's creative or not, like everything that we do in our daily life. And if we go and do something that is not a routine thing that we do daily, then it's kind of a creativity expression that we do, our creative task that we do.
Exactly. And you also asked about virtuosity, and I would say, because it's some form of higher level creativity usually, right? Which is rare, and as you said, there's a lot of skill involved. So it's a judgment which we usually spare for special people or special kind of output. And if we look at generative AI right now, the output that we see and the level of creativity that we see is very much on an everyday basis. Still creative, but not to the highest levels yet.
Yeah, but that depends on, I guess, machine learning tools are getting better. Like the two things that are probably, or the three things that are needed to do this is like a lot of data, a lot of time, and a lot of computing power, right? These are the three things that you need. And the longer you train a model on, per se, your creative thinking or whatever it is, the more creative it will get. So when you say it's not today, but will it be in the future?
Okay, so I would argue a little bit differently. I would say just going in this direction with those three things won't get us anywhere. Look at very brilliant and highly intelligent people. They are not necessarily more creative or on genius levels, not necessarily. So to be creative, as I said, like all you need is this ability to associate things, to generate ideas. What makes an idea a very good or highly valued idea is the judgment by the system. So the same idea can be called minor in some context, and when a lot of people agree that it's a good idea, and maybe they work on this idea and improve it and make it big, and we call it innovation, and then it has a societal impact to some degree. So that's then a big idea, but it could still be the same, right? So as these systems are now able to create on this basis, on this like everyday level, I would say there's nothing left that we would need to add other than the situational or the social judgment.
All right, so it's still the human loop that needs to be involved in order to decide if this is like a thing and a creative outcome of a system or not. Do you fear that this is going to impact musicians and artists? Because like once we have a tool that we defined in our society that this is a breakthrough tool that is going to be used by all the creative artists out there, and it has a lot of like automatic thinking in it. Do you think that like musicians will have a problem with that, or that musicians will rather have a chance to be involved in the process of like deciding what's a tool that has a big impact on society or not, or on the music industry, artistry? So who decides that? So at the end of the day, is it like the majority of the society, or is it like the community of artists and musicians who are going to build these tools that will have an impact?
I mean, it's very difficult to answer that question. It's like, again, the scope is quite vast. But what I think, the best way to look at it is to look at the history. Because when it comes to machine learning in the context of music, I think we can think of these systems as sound reproduction technologies, essentially. Like mostly they're in the context of music. I think, as far as my knowledge goes, we can think of them as sound reproduction technologies. And what happened with sound reproduction technologies was that whenever it was introduced, there was some horrification, just like going around the whole concept. We can take the telephone as a technology. We can take the record, the phonograph, if I'm not mistaken. Phonograph, yeah. We can take drum machines. Electronic music was like a big invention by itself. I mean, the whole thing is quite big, but I think there was always this fear that this will now replace us. Well, to some extent, if you want to think about it, like the main intention was maybe like talking about electronic music. Let's take drum machine for instance. the intention of drum machine might have been to replace the drummer, but it didn't really happen that way.
Yeah, go on.
It didn't really happen. It actually found different routes to make different forms of music and allowed more musicians to express themselves in different ways. If we take like sound that is produced electronically, maybe the intention, I think, you know, not for a fact, but like a good intention was to reproduce the sound of piano, for instance, or reproduce the sound of guitar. But they were not doing very good, you know, during the emergence, especially in the first, in the early days. So they just like found different. They formed new aesthetics. They formed new ways of expression, which formed new artists. Of course, some people were replaced, but not replaced. But they found that okay, if we start tapping into these technologies, we might actually be able to express ourselves differently. You know, if we think about it, it was always this idea of, yeah, we are afraid of this technology, and those that ended up using it and adapting to it ended up benefiting from it. And those that were afraid of it, they just...
Yeah, but it was mainly, like I have a picture, like this is from back in the days when mechanic music, basically like orchestra musicians back in the days, they feared that they're gonna go out of jobs. And what I wanted to say is that back in the days, there was like always an outside power that decided that this is now, how you say, like a societal impact. Like this is a machine that's going to be used by hundreds and thousands and millions of people, and people who are not, like artists were not part of the conversation. So artists were left out, and people said, okay, now we have the phonograph, we have the tape, we have like certain tools, and we don't need any musicians in the radio anymore, we can play the record and all these kind of things. So what and this is like a question probably to all of you, I want to like stress this collaboration thing between research and artists and all these different, like you are a musician as well, right? And you do research, and you know about machine learning and all this kind of stuff. Do you feel that you need to get involved with people who actually build tools for music that use machine learning? Because you would have the technical knowledge, but at the same time, the music side as well. So back in that days, nobody wanted to get involved in how to like distribute or build a phonograph or a tape recorder, whatever it is. But these days, there are people who have a certain technical skill and an artistic skill who could define what's going to have the impact in the future and make it as easy as possible for artists to deal with what comes up.
So, let me think through how to get at this. You ask essentially, should we be afraid that something like this
should
happen?
People like you get involved, like in the
Stephen
future of like the tech side of the music world?
I mean, so I think it's, well, overall, it's good if people come together from different sides. Like you asked us before, like, oh, can we actually speak each other's language? And I think this is always, when new things clash together, it's always part of the cultural shift is to actually understand what each other is talking about and meaning. And I think here a lot of the fears are actually about, oh, it's just going to replace us because you can see what it's able to, but you might not actually see what the opportunities are that come along with it. Yeah. And so for us, I mean, it's not just in music, right? It's everywhere. These generative models, for instance, in the sciences now, in education, of course, every student now uses ChatGPT to write their reports or their diploma or bachelor's thesis. And so the question there is not to say, oh, you're not allowed to do this, or how dare you do this, this is not the right thing to do. It's just a matter, okay, what's a different way to actually judge the achievement of that student? Like, it makes no sense to say in the future that, oh, a final degree, a bachelor's thesis, is just awarded on a written document. That just no longer makes sense.
But that's a
right?
yeah.
And so I think we need to engage different people in the discussion of what we want to do. In the music industry, I've seen people, or in the writer's strike in Hollywood was the same thing. People just becoming really afraid. What can these computer models do? Now they can do this regardless if we like it or not. So the question is, A, to get involved in the discussion, what do we want these models to do, what's allowed to do it, and B, what, like I mentioned with the bachelor's thesis, what's a shift now that we just need to do because we are entering a new era of new abilities.
But isn't this, like, isn't that, like the thesis example that you brought up with like ChatGPT and asking, like, it's not that there's an equal opportunity for all the students out there because they all can use ChatGPT. The one who educated themselves on the skill to write prompts, to know how to interact with that machine, to know, like, who spends a lot of time with that machine, that person's thesis will definitely be better than the one who has used it the first time. So isn't it a necessity to educate people and to train people in music on how to use these tools and make them understand how they function?
Absolutely. I mean, that's partly why we're here, right? Actually, because yes, we do want to, and it's super important in this era of new technology, to actually make sure that people have access, or reasonable and fair access to these resources, right? And it applies to an individual, like you say, a student. It applies to us as a society. So, for instance, I mean, we're part of the HELMHOLTZ research center. So these are the large research centers in Germany that actually operate the largest supercomputers in Germany. And so we have discussions amongst us to say, okay, which ones of these models do we want to also take up and build in Germany so that we have them available for us as a society, and they're not in some company in California that we have no influence over, right? So I think we are facing, actually, as a society, and in the EU, luckily, it's actually really a very good example that the parliament is taking up this idea of what's a fair use and a responsible use of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a whole topic that we could talk for ages. It's an important topic. But you know, sticking with that ChatGPT example, because this is probably your main machine that you're working with, right? Like, if artists, like, I know that people try to write, like, so for me, AI is a tool in every kind of sense. I think, like, if you're bad in your craft and you want to impersonate someone or want to, like, be as good as a painter or a musician, but you would never be able to actually learn all these instruments and all these skills, AI can actually help you to kind of compensate the weaknesses that you have or empower your strengths. So I have friends who are super good musicians, but they're really bad in text writing, songwriting, and all that kind of stuff. And for them, ChatGPT is a big thing, because it's not always perfect, but it helps them to inspire and to then, like, I don't know, when they have a writer's blockade, to, like, move on with that. Would you say in your, like, I don't know how many hours you worked with ChatGPT so far, but you probably talked a lot to that machine. Would you say that from a pure poetic perspective in writing songs that could touch you and could be emotional, would a machine, I'm talking for all the songwriters out there, is that possible that this machine will be able to do this?
Not without very intense prompting, I would say. So and that is exactly where the human is in a loop, as we keep saying, because this machine is not doing it, like, as you said, with one click. It gives a lot of output, but it needs refinement, because any kind of, like, if you put in, like, a vague instruction, what can you do with prompts, you get vague answers. That's the rule, number one. So if you want to have, like, a very certain emotional song text or something, you actually have to put in a lot of content, a lot of information to get precise content out. That's the rule. So again, I think it needs this imagination of a human to come up with, like, good results. I think it's easy to get good enough results, but to have really good results, you have to put in a lot.
All right, but isn't the, like, if you, like, I have the experience, I didn't do a lot with ChatGPT, but when I communicate with that machine about a certain topic, and the longer I communicate with that machine, the more it really gets what I mean with the prompts that I put in. So let's say you are a musician and you are going through a drug addiction and you want to get rid of that, and you are asking ChatGPT, what can I do, what helps me, this, that, and you talk to the machine, like, for days and weeks about this topic, because this is something that is, like, the main focus in your life. and then you want to write a text about that and express your feelings, but you're really bad in songwriting and text writing, so you let the machine do that. Wouldn't that be a possible outcome because you've communicated so much with that?
Okay, first, don't use it as a therapist.
No.
There are studies about that. It's really bad, okay, because it's very vague. But yes, if you converse a lot with it, it gets a lot of information and can use that to be more precise, exactly. And then again, it's the question of who's the judge of whether this output is good enough as a context. I mean, we also have bands who sing la 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 like for 3 minutes, and it's still considered a creative song somehow by some people. So it's really a matter of who's the judge.
Maybe I can chime in here a little bit, right? I read a few months ago, right, Nick Cave complained because some fans actually used ChatGPT to write lyrics, and they were really, like, asked ChatGPT to write new song texts for Nick Cave songs and send it to him because they were really excited, and he was, of course, super offended because, like, how could this machine ever come up with something that would come close to what he experienced as a human being and that he went through, and we might know about his personal history, that actually led to these song texts in the end. And so that's a valid answer. It's about, you know, essentially about the usefulness of the result, and usefulness doesn't mean monetary value. Usefulness could be that it triggers emotions in you and that it has like you as a human react to something in a positive or strong way. The trick is, however, that of course this machine is learned on song text. So can it generate text? And ChatGPT is really, it's a text generator. It's not I wouldn't actually say it's intelligent. That's the whole thing. That's why I said it's machine learning and not artificial intelligence. And the prompt that you provide essentially shift these probabilities that we talk about to just generate text that's more like from this and not that topic, or in this and not that style. It doesn't actually learn anything from your prompts. It just shifts the probabilities in the model to give you different text. And now can that text come closer and closer to something that's superficially similar to Nick Cave? Because yes, it's also read all his song lyrics. Yes. Yeah, and so that's the tricky thing. Right?
I think one aspect that is also in this example, I think, is that we as humans are not so special with our emotions and feelings and thoughts. And I know that artists who produce, like, you know, put their own stories and emotions in song texts or pictures or paintings, whatever, of course they feel like it's super special, and it is for them in this situation. But overall, we share all this kind of human experience, and it's in the data set, very well represented, so of course you can also take it out.
Yeah, but the human side of things is still that the emotional side of things, because we haven't invented an emotional machine learning system, so a machine can't be heartbroken, a machine can't go through a drug addiction, a machine can't
No, but
do
it
all
can
that.
produce, like, lyrics, for example, that trigger emotions in us.
Yes.
Like another artist would do. So there's again this debate, I think, nudging on now about being and appearing. And I think if you look only at output as like a song text, where's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, the machine can learn what triggers and what doesn't trigger. Putting that from the written text words to like the musical side of things, I guess that there's also studies and research about what kind of like chords work best to have like a major pop song, and what kind of frequencies work best to kind of like trigger certain, I don't know, synapses in your brain, these kind of things. Have you done something with that, or any experiments with like similar to the text example that I just said, like trying to let a machine produce, I don't want to say functional music, but produce music for a certain purpose because it has learned that this purpose can be achieved by using X, Y, Z?
I wouldn't say, you know, again, with the example of ChatGPT, I wouldn't say without an excessive refinement of the prompts that you do in order to actually make it into a usable that is resonating with your emotions. I wouldn't say so, no. But like one thing that we really have to consider is music is inherently a cultural related phenomena. Something that might harmonically resonate with me might not do with you, or some members in the audience, or it might resonate with you. So it's like, it's very difficult to encode that. Well, it's very difficult yet, I know, for a lot of fellow machine learning researchers to encode these cultural information into machines and actually generate culturally informed music, which could resonate with people from a specific, when we talk about culture, we're not talking this like traditional sense that, like for instance, if I'm coming from Iran, I only resonate with music that have been exposed to in Iran, because now we're living in this, in the era of internet, so we're like exposed to a lot of different sounds and different kind of harmonies from different cultures. But what I do see, like an interesting application, what I see is the moment that AI is being developed, well, the accessibility of developing these systems will be in the hands of us. Actually, like everyone in their home can start developing these systems within a click on their own collected data, which culture, well, we were talking about music, in the frame of music, that it culturally resonates with them, and that could actually lead to an emotionally pleasing outcome.
Okay. So I got you. So you mean like if I can take the treasure of audio and music that I have on my hard drives and feed that to a machine in the future, it would come up with music that would automatically be pleasing to me because I used to like all the other stuff.
Well, the chances are high, if we are training a model on my playlist and then we're asking you to.
But if I'm listening to, like, I grew up with like hip hop, then went to skate punk, then to drum and bass, then to like ska, reggae, and dancehall, and now I'm into funk and soul. So it's kind of like in the same realm, but I didn't go to heavy metal or techno. But let's add that to it as well, and then tell a machine to come up with something that's pleasing to me. I mean, as we all know, a machine is not a human being, so it must be pretty confusing to that machine to understand like what it should come up with or
but
not.
Which human being would know the answer either?
Well, when I'm talking about developing this machine, it's not like an end-to-end that you just like say, hey, come and see this data and generate something that is pleasing for me. We're talking about series of steps that results to the desired outcome. So,
right.
Which it's beyond the scope of this talk, obviously, and I'm unaware of a lot of those steps at the present time. But that's how I actually see these things, because what really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter the methodology we use to create music or create sounds or any other form of art. It has to resonate with, it has to touch something in our brains. It has to touch something in our nostalgia, in our memory, or I don't know, some other things, something that we might experience yesterday or is likely to experience tomorrow in a society that we're living. And it has to resonate with that. So it's like all about localizing these models. It's about...
So there's no general, because I just read a piece about like the saddest song in the world. There's a YouTube, it's on YouTube, it's an old song, I really unfortunately can't remember that. But some researchers have defined that this is the saddest song in the world. So it has to resonate with like lots of people who were part of that research, I guess. So if we take that song structure and we feed it to an AI, and I don't want to get too deep into all of that, but at the end of the day, this is a result that humans did with research, and it can be fed to a machine, and the machine can understand that if this is how we make people cry, we should produce, or we can produce more music in that sort of sense, huh?
I mean, yes, actually. The simple answer to that is yes. It's ultimately about how much data you have available. And just as an example of, I would be hard to predict because I had, personal history that led me through different music directions. Yes, that's partially true, but also, there are many, many other people that Spotify learns from, right? They don't just learn from your one example. From one example, you cannot learn this, absolutely. From many, many other humans, there will be some similarities and who like certain seemingly distinct groups of musics and not other ones. And so there, actually, you are probably more predictable than because of all the other data from millions of other humans than we might ourselves think. Yeah? And getting additional data like, how did humans react to this? And not just, oh, what you liked something, but any additional, oh, I liked it because it made me happy. I liked it because it makes me sad. That's information that will help, depending if you think it's helpful, that will assist AI systems to become more and more creative in our understanding of this term.
So at the end it comes down to the amount of data, and like I agree with you that, I spoke to a couple of people at Stability and stuff, and they also believe that it's just a matter of, they say months, maybe years, that we can run systems like that on our own computers. And but that might be technically possible, but then we still have the problem that we need the amount of data, and you just said I can take the data from my hard drive, which is...
That's one possibility
Yeah,
that I said.
but I could never use it in a commercial way. You know where I want to get? I want to get like the people who have produced this music, like let's say I have a terabyte of music on my hard drive, and I feed it into an AI and cool stuff comes out. I could never, like I could use it for my own pleasure, but I could not like use it for like commercial senses or perform it with a band and then maybe charge tickets for that, because at the end of the day, I took this music that I have on my hard drive to enhance my own creative output and then maybe perform it with my own band. But the people who have produced the music in the first place, who are on my hard drive, they wouldn't allow that, because they have put their creativity and their craft into the music, and not to give it to me in order to like piggyback on their creativity, basically.
What is very interesting in this sense is that the same people that might complain about us using other people's data to gain some financial benefit out of it, they might not complain if we just like listen to that music and then go through the hardship of learning about music and harmony and structure and form and all of those requirements to come up with a musical piece. And if at the end of the day, if we listen to their music and come up with something very similar, they might not complain about it. But if we're like using the machine to do it for us, and just like, us being a supervisor, which at the end of the day, it's not really their data that's coming out of the machine, it's the in-between data, I would say, because, well, obviously it's like the same thing is, in most of the cases, the same thing is not coming out. Taking, for instance, a Beatle track as an example. If the Beatles track is included in the data set of a machine that we have, trained it on a vast corpus of data, we might not actually be capable of extracting the Beatles track out of it.
Yeah.
We might not be, I don't know the answer, because we're also like talking very abstract here. But it's like a very interesting discussion by itself, which we can save it for later. But
Yeah. No. I mean, this is how we can figure out what data is in the song that comes out at the end of the day. So far, the people that I talk to, it's a problem we can't solve if we have like a billion of songs, and then people talk about fingerprinting. But I don't want to get too deep into that. Yeah. At the end of the day, I like what you said. Like at the end of the day. We could learn that craftsmanship and that music that we like from our most favorite bands by ourselves over a period of 20 or 30 years, maybe be never as good as they are, but we could do it potentially. And an AI just speeds up the process in order to like helps us have the desired outcome without learning the craftsmanship, which means AI is going to make us lazy. And
I mean, which I think, as human beings, we inherently are. Work shy sort of creatures. I mean, that's I think we agree, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is why
that's why we invent computers. I mean, that's why we invent stuff. Basically.
Why kids probably can't read maps anymore, because we have this device with us that tells us where to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree. But this goes. It's not like this doesn't go well with creativity. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't be lazy in order to. I mean, you don't invent things in your sleep, and you have to have some sort of thriving impulse in yourself in order to be creative. Do you because you're the expert on creativity, basically, also human creativity, right? It's not only, you don't only look for like the creative potential of machines, but also on human beings. Do you feel with like the access to technology and with tools that make it as easy as we just talked about, leads to less creativity or different, like, I don't want to, I know that it's a matter of perspective and we had that.
It depends, yes.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, do you, because like you're doing so much research, do you see like that there's a different kind of creativity that grows in human beings through the technology and the tools that we have at our hands? Or do you think that people that you've spoken to, that you've done research with, lose parts of their creative side in themselves because things are automated and they don't need to put much effort in learning an instrument or something like that?
I would say it really depends. So we see all sorts of these things, right? So we see people getting lazy. We have the Googling effect, right? We forget stuff. Who knows telephone numbers nowadays? Like, I know just my own. And that's a fact because we have all these kind of devices with us all the time. This access of information that makes us lazy. That's one part of the story. But on the other hand, we get enhanced in our abilities through technology all the time. We know so much more thanks to Google Maps. And we know now we have like a fancy color palette with now, I don't know, sparkling colors thanks to technology, which makes us more creative in other ways. Right? So maybe we get lazy in learning instruments, traditional instruments, but then we have digital instruments, like, you know, prompting them, and learning how to prompt is a new skill. So I would not necessarily say that we get less creative, it really shifts. But there's a big but, and that is that the sheer fact that we look at screens, and most technology comes in forms of screens, the sheer fact that we look in these squares makes us less creative. It's like literally it makes us look inside a box. And there was a very, very great Nature paper about that, comparing Zoom meetings with like normal desk meetings, right, in real life. And we can see that we think less flexible when we look inside a box. It's depressing because our modern world, modern working life is built so much around digitalization and working digitally. So there's this big but. And the second thing is that through technology, information is so easy to access that we are constantly overwhelmed and we are never bored anymore. And boredom is so important for our inspiration and for finding problems that we might want to find solutions for, and, you know, be open for inspiration of all sorts. So there sits the other big but.
All right, but it means that if I'm a pianist and I learned that that instrument for like 30 years and by heart, and I reached that point where I'm lang lang, I know everything. So in order to take the next step, to be able to compete, like let's talk about what's 10, 20 years, in order to compete with people who have used a machine learning system on AI to kind of like give me the same outcome than a pianist. Or maybe a pianist is a bad example because it's all about performance in playing live, and this is probably a long time until a machine is doing that. But let's talk about a composer. Like, I'm a great composer. I compose scores for movies and stuff like that. And I've done that. I learned that by heart. And in the future, that's probably one of the more likely things to happen, is that a machine learning system can also compose scores. So in order for me to survive that phase as a creative composer that writes these scores, I must basically learn how to use these machine learning and AI systems in order to be competitive with like the folks that have started this whole career with like machines.
Well, in general, I would say so, yes. There's this, like, the famous phrase that you are not substituted by AI, but you're most likely substituted by a person who uses AI. Because AI makes us so much more efficient. And efficiency in our world counts a lot. But then I would also say that for every trend, you always find a counter trend that might be niche or tinier in impact and in size and magnitude, but you will find it. So I think going analog, and for me, I think my prediction for the next 10 years is that we recognize that we actually have bodies and we you know, think more physically, I guess, as this counter movement. So there, you will always find those niches, but then it's a question of you're the lucky one surviving in a niche.
So I think what you're getting at, what I think we will see, and what we see with ChatGPT already, is that computers are able to create new or generate creative new output that is similar to what the machine has already learned. That's sort of this, almost like there's some definitions of almost like levels of creativity, and sort of the simplest level is generate more things similar to what you already knew. And I think this type of application we'll see a lot, be it music, be it in the lab actually for us too, or writing scientific text, or be it for the screenwriters in Hollywood. This discussion the other day, and it's like, yeah, there's manuals how to write this too. And if there's a manual how to write it, it's already in ChatGPT because the book's in there. And so people will write predictive scripts for soap operas. A computer will do a very decent job at this. And so then the question is, what new formats are there where you're not just generating things, but you're combining things in a new way. You're stepping outside, we had this before, it's like with the Virtuosity, is stepping outside your known coordinate system somewhere else where things really look and sound different. These kind of things that happened in art history, right? When you had the first abstract paintings or 12-tone music, it's like something that's really different from how things were before. That's where I see definitely machines still not being at that point yet.
All right, but that's like the rather boring part of machines, like replicating things that have already been there. The example that we had before, like with my hard drive of all the different genres that I have, like, isn't that a likely, like, that's my hope. Like, so when I was young, you could see what kind of music people would listen to, how they dressed. Like, certain people dressed in certain subcultures. So I don't see that anymore on the streets, and I don't know where this went. Maybe we don't have that many subcultures anymore, maybe because the music cultures in themselves are not as present and as, are not there anymore. So my question here is, from a musical perspective, would an AI be able to create a new kind of subculture by mixing genres with each other that would create a new genre, and like we can take it until the infinity, but with that genre create a certain style, a certain image, a certain visual identity to the subgenre. So at the end of the day, an AI system, like that's my hope, could create a kind of like a movement and a subculture that's driven by music but has like a way broader perspective on society than just music. Is that a likely thing that we can expect from the future, like having an AI system as a driver for a subculture?
I think you just described TikTok in your words, right? Because
true, yeah.
I mean, like TikTok algorithms is actually allowing a lot of, especially younger generation. I think when I'm between maybe 15, 16 to 20, I'm like referring to, they are perfecting these algorithms, mostly AI powered, to collaborate in ways unimaginable so far. The remixing culture is just on a different level now, with a lot of machine learning music algorithms like stem separation, which essentially deconstructs the sound of one like a mixture track into different parts of it, and then you can use different parts like a piano of a track and mix it with a vocal and then sing on top of it and then put it out there to express yourself in ways or collaborate with your favorite artist that you so far didn't have such a privilege. And like through these kind of collaborations, people are finding each other and creating more contents and like creating these virtual subcultures. So yes, of course, it's no longer similar to what was, I don't want to like, you know, point out any dates because I'm very bad at those, but like it's not similar to the punk culture that was going on, you know, in Britain or maybe also in Germany. It's not similar to the techno culture.
But it's humans trying to make use of the tools on a what is it, a social media platform, and collaborate with each other from different backgrounds, different countries, different musical backgrounds. But where I want to go is like it's unlikely, the example that I said before, that a folk singer hangs out with I don't know, I'm not on TikTok, maybe I'm totally wrong now and it's super embarrassing, but I guess that there are no folk singers who collaborate with heavy metal drummers and techno producers and rap artists to create new songs. If that's so, then that's amazing. But where I want to go is like an AI you can give them like millions of tracks from one genre and another genre and another genre, and it would come out with a track of a mixture of all these genres, which humans are not capable of doing because of the digesting of that big amount of data. Well, that's where I want to go. Is that possible?
So you can, I mean, another level of creativity is just to combine different things. And of course humans are way more, humans are less effective in combining new things. Computers kind of just combine more things together, right? Because they're faster, they're more efficient in that way. But that comes back to the second part, which is the value aspect, right? It's like not any random combination will be interesting for humans. Most of it will sound like shit to us, and so it has no value to us. And so the important part that would come in, and also in the sciences, for instance, if we step too far outside what's known, we need some other entity to tell us, is that useful? Is that of value? And so this is for the music that holds, and even in the lab, when we create new DNA sequences and think, will the root now grow better? If I stay close to the original genome, I know what's going to happen. The computer can come up with suggestions that are totally far off. I have no idea if this will work. Maybe it does, but I need to go back in the lab and check it if it gets too far from what I already know. Yeah, and the same holds here. And it's again a matter of the data then. If people give input and feedback and information to the computer, what combinations are valuable and interesting, for whatever reason, at some point a machine learning algorithm will extract some underlying features. And the last thing I want to say is, but that's also interesting, and that's, for instance, the sciences interesting, and maybe also in the music industry. Like, why are certain things then suddenly of value? Why do we like certain things? Why does this genome sequence now work? So if I can turn this around and use the machine learning not just to give me some new stuff, but also help me understand our own emotions, our own reaction to this better. It's cool, right?
I want to add something that I think when we're talking about human genomes, we're like, I mean, there are lives at stake there if something goes wrong, correct?
Well, that's why I said plants, right?
Yes, well, there are life of the plants are at stake, which could result to some environmental issues later on.
Yeah, I mean, we're not, letting this loose in
of course.
And there are things in the lab, for instance, like we are building, not me at my lab, but colleagues are building like mini tissues and trying to replicate different parts of your body to effectively be able to do this and assess it without like trying this out on a human. Right?
Yeah. No. Well, what I wanted to actually refer to is that such failure cases in the musical or like a bit broader in the artistical sense is actually seen as advantages rather than life-staking phenomena. So that's why I wanted to just like put a spotlight on, and I think, wow, I lost it all.
Okay.
Yeah, then I take over. So what I was also hearing here is that, because I would agree generally that usefulness is important, but and random combination is not what we want per se, but what we gain definitely by AI is easy access to all sorts of information that makes us more powerful in the sense of combining much more as our brains would be able on its own. And by that, I think what you said you value in music, we sometimes in research we call serendipity. So this randomness of finding something that sparks actually an association or an idea, that is great. And I think by having the computer power basically to randomly combine more things, more styles, more data points on genomes, whatever, I think we just increase the chance of like successful serendipity here.
So yeah, in order to wrap this up, like the last question that I have is like how, like the question that stands overall is here, like can AI be a booster for creativity? And I guess it depends. But how, like from your own perspective, how do you think can, like now we learn so much about like that societal norms play a role in acceptance of certain tools and when it's gonna work or not, but how can AI be beneficial for us as human beings in order to enhance our creativity in the future? So what would be your dream scenario besides saying you can train AIs on your own computer? Like what do you think like will be the booster for our own creativity in the future when everyone has access to AI tools? Do you want to start?
Yes, I have a vision. Now my vision is that first off we get rid of texting because that is ridiculously inefficient. So first off I want to talk to a bot and get direct, yeah, it's just so much quicker.
More scary.
Is it? I could change voices, of course. And like my dream really is, you remember Clippy? The very annoying...
You can do that with Alexa already or not?
Nah, no. So Clippy was your...
Clippy on Word. Yeah.
Clippy on like on in Windows, like Office tool, right? The what is it called? Like it's a clip.
A different name, I think.
No, it's Clippy.
It was Clippy?
Yes, it's so Clippy. We get Clippy, but then like very smart, and it kind of like has this memory of what I talked to, so I don't have to repeat my prompts again and again. But it becomes basically my personal assistant. That's my dream. So because I forget a lot, then I won't because I have Clippy. And then what is essentially like super necessary for creativity is that this tool will be off for like a third of the day. So I won't be bothered by technology. That's the dream.
All right. What's your vision of like the booster for creativity with AI?
So there's the professional side in genetics. I hope that we actually get more creative than we are, because in the creativity we get to new solutions and to new directions that we might not have looked at, because we're working a lot with like very little bits of knowledge that we already have, and I think this will give us totally new directions to look into. In my private musician thing, I'm as analog as possible. I sing in an a cappella vocal group. It doesn't get more analog than this. The only digital thing is if I forget my scores at home, I have to read them on the iPad. Why am I saying this? Why do I want to say this? And it's the same as what you said, is because our brains, we don't quite understand yet how our brains and how our own creativity is influenced by just doing so much digital and on screens and in boxes. And, singing together with other people just, activates parts of my brain that would otherwise not be active at all, right? And so this part of why music doesn't even exist in evolution, and what was the evolutionary advantage of having music, that's all what it's about, right? It's like music has some inherent stimulation to the brain that was useful, otherwise it wouldn't have led to its current state where we are, so that actually doesn't get lost. I think we really need to watch out and make sure that our lives maintain room for this.
Yeah, and lastly,
last of you.
Yeah, well, I think it would be very much in lines of something I would like to call as explacement rather than replacement, that it just like extends you to a point that you essentially replace your past self. They just like give you so much room to move and navigate that you no longer be doing the things that you have done before. It just so it's a very interesting times indeed. Which essentially, maybe I'm just like projecting myself onto the question, but this is what happened to me. I'm no longer doing what I used to do a few years ago, but I definitely was not replaced
Yeah.
as much as I was.
But it's cool, like
Boosted.
all of you had like put a strong spotlight on the human side of things, and all you wanted to do is basically have a little helper or an extension of your own brain by a machine. But none of you talked about a machine that generates things for you to enhance your creativity. So that's a cool thing, and I think it's a positive outlook into the future, and I think maybe one day we are still alive when we have one of these tools, and it will boost all our creativity. And yeah, thanks so much for this conversation. I learned a lot, and thanks all of you for coming, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening.